Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of standDOWN Podcast. I'm Daniel Reskin, your ex and former comedian host, figuring out the love-hate relationship of stand-up comedian and talking to those stand-ups who have stood down. Today on the show, we have got Jake Lloyd Bacon, who I knew as Jake Lloyd when he did comedy. Now we're going to see all the different changes that have happened. This is someone I've known online entirely for about 11 years now, which, I've been doing comedy almost 14, 15, if you count the pandemic or not. So comedy, you make a lot of relationships, and sometimes you never even meet the people, but I could always tell he was appreciated what he was doing. He was doing stuff that I wanted to do. He was producing stuff. He wasn't just doing comedy. He was writing, producing, and doing all sorts of other projects. So I'm curious to see how that fits in with stand-up, and sometimes stand-up is just another thing that we do. It's not the end-all be-all. So we will see today in our interview with Jake Lloyd Bacon. Thanks for being here, everybody. All right, and here we are with Jake Lloyd, as I know him, Jake Lloyd Bacon. I'm not sure. We'll get to the bottom of that and more. Welcome, Jake.
How's it going, Daniel?
Long time, no anything, really.
Yeah, it's been so long that I don't know whether you prefer to be called Daniel or Dan.
I'm a Daniel man.
Are a Daniel man. All right, that's fair.
My mom said, you got a full name. Why don't you roll it out? Roll the whole thing out.
I respect that. As you just alluded to, I've recently had to decide to roll out my whole name, so I understand.
So you've been hiding the bacon from us in the stand-up world.
Yeah, it's a lot. I never used my last name professionally because of the litany of personal and daddy issues that I have. And it's just after not just stand up for all those years, but as an actor, as a filmmaker, as an entertainer of any kind, having a name that is already well known for that shitty Star Wars kid from episode 1. His name is Jake Lloyd.
Uh-huh.
On top of that, there's an Australian rugby player, like Australian rules rugby player named Jake Lloyd, who's also very popular. And then so recently did I discover a fucking whack job conservative YouTube QAnon pundit named Jake Lloyd. So
wow.
And he's got like the YouTube, and I'm just like, you know what? I still struggle with owning my last name. I still struggle with the daddy issue of it all. But when it comes down to it, like I would rather be the one and only Jake Lloyd Bacon than one of the 7 Jake Lloyds.
Ooh, the dubious Jake Lloyds. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I have just changed the question that people ask, because the question that people used to ask is, are you the kid from Star Wars? Like, that was the most direct question, because we haven't seen him in a while. And like, if I was out in public and people would see the name Jake Lloyd, they'd be like, "Oh, well, you're not." They would do that thing, that like
little Anakin.
And so obviously the answer was like, I'm 7 years older than that kid. Clearly no. But now the question is just going to be back to the question that I received my entire childhood, which is, are you related to Kevin Bacon? Of which I will universally answer yes. The answer is no, but I will always answer it. Yes.
You're like,
Uncle Kev.
Degrees I am, sure. But,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Uncle Kev and I. Yeah, he's a good guy.
Interesting. And quickly, like, comedy is such like a silly world where having a punchy name might help. You never thought of like Jake Bacon? I know you didn't want the baconness for other reasons.
It's such a good name.
That bacon punch. Like, people love bacon, the food.
It's such a good name for me to not have used for all these years. But I just, listen, emotional baggage, it can weigh a lot. And that's what it comes down to. But yeah, I mean, even just my first and last, even without using my middle, Jake Bacon it's not, you have this sort of rhyming nature of the ache sound in there. Like, it's such a good name. But alas, but then when I decided to use my full name, of course, now I've got 20 years worth of work that I've done under Jake Lloyd that I feel like going from Jake Lloyd to Jake Bacon was too big. So now I'm like, I'll just use the whole. Now I'm in the 3-name club. Right. Welcome to Talking About Names with Daniel Reskin and Jake Lloyd Bacon.
What's in a name?
Things
We'll
roll
get
in.
into whether being able to distance yourself from your old stand-up persona is a good thing or ultimately
Sure.
troubling thing for the work you're doing in the show business and all the projects. But before we get there, let's
Sure.
do a little background for the people. A little bit about, on a normal comedy podcast, you want your origin story. In this case, we only
Sure.
want your origin story so that we can get to uh the walking away story,
Sure.
which is our
Um,
story here.
yeah, so I was one of those uh poorly directioned youths where as a teenager, I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to be a rock star and I wanted to be a stand-up comic and I wanted to be a professional wrestler and I wanted to be, I wanted to be everything. Um, and how do you do any one of those things? Like no one told me how to do any one of those things, so I was just doing them all a little bit at the same time. And
Mm.
it really, the stand up was actually the last of them to come because it wasn't until like the first time I ever tried stand up was on Long Island, Governor's Comedy Cabaret, at an open mic there. And it was like I didn't do it again then for like 3 months. It wasn't the sort of thing that I immediately was like, I got to do this right now.
What year was this, or how old were
And
you?
it was because I was performing in bands,
Okay.
and so I was doing shtick as a musician, like, and so yeah, I kind of was getting my fill that way. And it wasn't until really I left New York, uh, and I couldn't keep a band together that I realized, like, oh, I can still get up on stage and get the same reward as playing in bands. I'll just cut the songs out and just do the dumb jokes that I was
Right.
doing in
The other
between.
people, the instruments, all that.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
When was this around?
So my very first time I ever did stand up, I want to say was 2002. Was my very first time I ever tried at the open mic, and then like I would do it sporadically, very sporadically, from 2002 to 2004. Moved to Florida, 2005, like end of 2004, 2005, I think it was, and then that's when I dove headfirst into stand up. And then I would start doing it regularly, week
Here
to
in
week.
Florida?
I first moved to Pensacola. I lived in Pensacola for a year.
Hot comedy town there.
Oh boy. Um, Anybody here in the military? That's how you start. That's the only way you can start any set in Pensacola, Florida. But then I would end up in Tampa, where I believe you and I crossed paths originally.
Yes.
So Tampa is where I think I would say Tampa is where I started seriously doing stand up, even though I had like dipped my toe in it for years prior.
Mhm.
And I took a job at the Improv, working the booth, and I, from there just kind of ingrained myself into the community down in Tampa, which I still did. I never fit in. I
Hmm.
was there. I was doing it. Um, but yeah, that's sort of how it started. And I was very lucky enough to have been appealing to a small group of headliners, and they were exclusively headliners who I noticed were not party people, who were not drinkers, who were not, like, so for example, Jim Gaffigan came through and, liked that I didn't drink. And
Good.
so I think at the time he had Taylor Williamson with him, and who also was just too young. Literally, I don't even think he was of age at the time. And so he was like, he brought me along and did a few more dates beyond the week that they came through. So I was really lucky in that sense to like have comics who would come through and be like, oh, he's
Right.
not one of the alcoholic stand-ups in Tampa.
Did he force you to
Um,
like do a bunch of hot pockets and donuts or something
uh,
though? Like it must have been something.
it was a lot of brunches, a
Uh-huh.
lot of big brunches with Gaffigan. But Tom
Just
Wilson was
get
another
the
guy who,
gout. You're like other comics have alcoholism.
right. Honestly, like
Cholesterol.
it is a thing. Like, so I don't drink. I've never been a drinker, and I think it was such a hindrance in the world of stand up for me.
Interesting.
It's a huge hindrance. And then there's tiny little percentage. It was like, yeah, but Tom Wilson, like, who I think was just sober, was so thrilled to have a young comic who could open for him, who like he didn't have to worry about, and who also he can hang out with. Because that was the
Right.
thing too, is they, the headliners who came through who weren't into like just hanging out at the bar until 2 in the morning, like they wanted someone to hang out with too, and I was like, yeah,
Right. Well,
God,
that's a cool niche to fill. That's
it
like
sounds so sad
the
when I talk about it
holdover.
out loud.
Yeah, it's clean niche, not even of clean comedy, but of
No,
people doing the
yeah,
comedy.
but yeah, that's the origin story from there, and I, I think that in Tampa, I don't know. I hate to say I hate the cliche that like I became a big fish in a small pond, because I didn't become a big fish. I became like a medium sized fish who was consistent and who at least I assumed people liked enough to keep me working. You know?
Yeah, you're more like a specialized fish that like evolved some sort of interesting mechanism to like feed itself without having to just be a big old shark.
Sure,
Um,
or I don't know if it was as evolutionary necessary. I might have just been the third eye fish from Springfield. It might have just been like something toxic in the water.
the mutation for sure. So you did comedy in because I started in Tampa too, and I'm trying to think back to where our paths crossed because I
Tampa Improv.
it
I think the
was
very first time I ever saw you might have been at a competition, might have been at a joke off, maybe.
wow.
Or I think the first time I ever saw you, because we did not, I don't believe that we were in the same, like, go to open mics and go to showcase show crowd.
Yeah, I was in Tampa. I was very much, it was my first year in comedy, and
Okay.
I didn't have a finger on like the actual scene. I couldn't find like what was, I think the improv thing was like in between for a second and it was just starting up or but anyway, I got caught up in Side Splitters, the club out in
Yep,
you know
I
this
know all
B,
about side
the B
splitters.
club. I mean, you know about
Listen,
the Side Splitters,
that
but
okay, that
yeah.
side splitters, first off, if you don't start a stand-up show with Earth, Wind, and Fire, you're doing it wrong. Okay? That is the best opening. Good God, I love that. But here's the thing is that I love that room so much. Could not stand how inconsistent those audiences were. But that's also, I think, just Florida, because you never know whether it's, biker night or whether it's,
Right.
the cool hip comedy nerds showing up, or if it's just like the drunken, like it's such a,
I
God,
mean,
Florida is the most bizarre audience
they
for
gave away free
comedy.
tickets like
Oh,
water,
sides.
so it was
Yeah.
pretty much just like they tried to fill the room up to sell their pretzels and stuff.
Nobody gave a crap who you were on stage. Make us laugh, nerd. Yeah, that was the
It
side
was a
splitters.
very low pressure environment for me, but yeah, I
It
can see
was.
how it was just like this weird junkyard of comedy in a way. Like there was a lot of great stuff happening, but it was they were
Yeah,
their own
and
like scrappy a B club, you know.
right, and there were a lot of great comics too that were working at the time, and that's, I feel like my big struggle in all of comedy. It doesn't matter where I was, whether it was when I was like really starting in New York, just meeting the other people doing stand up, um, or in Florida when I think it was at my thickest of doing it, if that makes sense. Like my like doing it every freaking night, and then I moved out to LA in 2009, and I continued to do it just as much as I was doing it in Florida. But obviously, you move to a new city. As much as I had contacts, you're still just starting over. Like, I can get booked on showcase shows easily enough, but you're still trying to, ingrain yourself into a completely new community.
Right.
And that's the universal problem. It's the universal problem that I think I've talked about it in therapy quite a bit, because it's, if it's the same problem everywhere you go, it's likely not other people, it's likely you. And I
Right.
acknowledge that, like, never able to find a family, never able to find a crowd, never able to find that little core group of people who
Huh.
you are. I always felt like there was this core group of people that I knew, and they were all cool with me, but I wasn't in their group. Then there was this little group of people I knew them, they knew me, I was cool with them, but I wasn't in the group. I'm always like somebody's distant cousin from out of town.
It's very high school. It's very
Oh
like
yeah.
I'm friends with the jocks and I'm friends with the cheerleader, I'm friends with the nerds, but I don't really fit into that's interesting. So you never feel like you had your comedy clique of like
No.
your main core little group of comics, no matter what
Right.
city you were in. Because I
Um
didn't have that in Tampa, but I did find it in Miami
see,
and in Denver to an extent. But
I feel like a lot of it also came down to comedy style, because
hmm,
like in mainstream comedy rules Florida, right? Like, and when I say mainstream, I mean like, like traditional, what modern mainstream is actually a little bit different than it was 15, 20 years ago. Um, so like it's usually crass, it's usually blue humor, but it's also very much like this is the world we live in and this is our shared experience. It's social commentary, it's acknowledgments, that sort of stuff. And I always felt like the kind of comedy that I liked leaned more alternative, leaned more towards the alternative comedy that just was not popular in Florida. Like alternative comedy in Florida, there wasn't any. But I also never felt alternative enough to fit in at like Largo when I moved out to California, when I moved out to Los Angeles. Like I wasn't, I wasn't alt enough to be, hanging out, with the Garfunkel and Oates crowd. Like I never, I don't know, I can never find it. I can never find that groove. I always sort of live somewhere in the middle. And maybe that's just my excuse. Maybe that's just like the thing that I told myself because I just didn't fit
Maybe
in
people have been
anywhere.
begging you to come hang and you've just been like, no, they
Uh,
don't like me. No, I
you
mean,
know, I
comedy's full of stuff like that, and I can totally relate.
and it might be that. It might have been just all of my own personal hangups. Hell, it might have just been you mentioned it, like high school. It might have just been all of my hangups from my youth and my adolescent that just lingered over because the entertainment industry, and yes, stand up in at its core is very much high school.
Yeah.
But but that's the idea. The thing is that when I started doing stand up, like I said, the first time on Long Island, the first stand up I ever saw, I think the first comic I ever saw live, I think was Robert Kelly. And
Robert Kelly. Okay, yeah.
yeah, I think that was the very first. And then I think Ted Alexandro was
Great.
next ish, and like so that was sort of like my comedy school was like those guys, but I hung out at Invite Them Up all the time. Do you know that show? That's like the big New York City alt show. That's like Bobby Tisdale and Eugene Merman started, and that's where names like Aziz Ansari and Dimitri Martin and Mike Birbiglia and like
Wow.
that whole group of comics. David Cross, who was already a huge star, but like he would come down and he would do sets or he would do like almost sketches, really. Um, John Glazer, like that whole group. I was the kid who, when I figured out that I could just get on a train and go to New York by myself. Like, there's a certain weird thing about growing up on Long Island is you don't realize that's a thing you can just do until like you get to a certain age. Like, and it wasn't until it was late. It wasn't until I turned like 20 or 21 that I realized like, oh, I can just go to the city. Like on my like I could just get a ticket, pay
Weird, right?
this
Yeah.
$15
Go to
and go
this
to the city. And
famous
it's
influential mecca of
yeah,
stand-up
and
comedy.
it's a 30-minute train ride. Like it's not a thing, but it's growing up kind of living outside of New York, going to the city was kind of a thing we all did.
Mhm.
Um and it wasn't until like that sort of clicked with me. I'm not a bright person, but it wasn't until I clicked with me that I was like, oh, I could go see shows, not just stand up. I can go see rock shows. I can go to clubs and see live music. There was this one venue called the Lemon that I don't even know how long it was open for. I felt like it was open and closed in the same week. But they had such awesome like singer songwriter shows, but then they also had like 2 nights that were stand up nights, and it was all of those alternate comedy people. And I was the wallflower there. I was like, the 19, 20-year-old sitting up against the wall in the corner, like that I would say hi to everybody, and like people like would notice me because I was there all the time. I was at every show.
Right.
Um, but for whatever reason, I never like dipped my toe into like that world of comedy, that sort of alternate stand up world, and which is weird because that's sort of I think what my comedy in Florida leaned more towards. It leaned more towards like stuff that
That New York style. Interesting.
yeah, or just stuff that wasn't like typical setup punchline laugh out loud. It was more just like yeah, odd. Like I never mind being a little odd. I never mind silence on stage and
Yeah.
embracing like the awkward moment. And in Tampa, Florida, that should never flew.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, take going to Florida might have been like traveling back in time comedically 5 or 10 years. And you really have to find those rooms in
Oh man,
Florida. Like luckily the room I got to run in Miami became like the smart, weird room where you try nonsense.
you
But you had
challenge
to find
things.
those places or cultivate them. And it's interesting that like, I think we all have to dip our toes in the water the same way. Like you being in New York, it's easy to regret and look back and be like, I should have just jumped up on stage back
God,
then.
yeah, not doing stand up in New York City regularly is like it's such a regret of mine. It is just such a I mean, because honestly, I don't know that I ever would have moved to Florida had I started doing that.
Right.
Like I ended up in Florida for girls. You know, it was I moved down I moved down to Pensacola because of a girl situation, and then I ended up in Tampa because that's where my cousin lived. So I was just supposed to be crashing with him for like a couple months.
Oh,
Met a girl at the improv, met a waitress at the improv, fell in love madly, head over heels, you know, was going to get married, all that nonsense, and ended up staying out in Tampa for, you know, 3 or 4 more years than I intended to
right.
before coming to Los Angeles. Now, that was also an odd thing because, you know, I came out to LA and I really my biggest regret really is not like I should have just went back to New York. I should after the shit in Pensacola flopped, should have just went back to New York and just went back and do stand up in the city. But you know, like I said, I always did have more than the one thing. Like I always wanted to be an actor.
Exactly.
Like I was always doing, even when I was doing stand up in Tampa, I was acting. I was in every, you know, student film at USF and all the University of Tampa and like all like I was just, you know, I was still trying. I was in like shitty local commercials in Florida and that sort
Dude, I
of
mean,
stuff.
honestly, like you were a big, like, I guess an inspiration in a way, because when I met you, you were Jake Lloyd, doer of things.
Oh
You
my
had
god!
this
Right,
website.
right. The website, Doer of Things. Wow, I can't believe you remember that.
Yeah, and I was just, I was getting my beak wet on stand up, trying to wrap my head around that. But you were doing all these things that I eventually would go on to learn and do
Yeah,
with production and acting. And like,
sure.
here in Denver, I'm doing a whole bunch of local commercials, that kind of crap. And I did a little
Yeah,
of my
it's
own.
awesome.
But back in Tampa, I was like, I want to do what this guy's doing. Like, I like the fact that he's doing so many different things. And even though I've kicked myself a million times being like, if I had just focused on stand up 100%, I'd be doing it right now. But
Man,
it's such a
that's the
mind fuck.
struggle. That's the struggle, and I feel like I have like artistic ADD in that sense, where man, I always use the term like jack of all trades, master of none when it comes to all of the things that I do. And all of my most successful friends, like they just figured out at like 22, like I'm just gonna do stand up. I'm just gonna act. I'm just gonna not even art stuff. Like I'm just gonna fucking concentrate on starting this tech company, or I'm gonna start an insurance. Like, you know, even if it's not entertainment or arts related, they just did the one thing. And I often don't wonder if I didn't shoot myself in the foot by having more than one dream and having more than one goal and having more than one like, you know, but I can play devil's advocate with myself in the fact that, like, you know, how many people are like you and I who can look, you know, who maybe in 30 years from now, when we're foot in the grave, can look back and be like, you know, look at all the shit that I did. Look at all the stuff I tried, even if we didn't succeed at it or whatever you define success as. Because there's a lot of things that I did that, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I was a successful musician. Did I ever get a massive record deal? No. Then do millions of people listen to my music? No. But did I tour with bands that I loved for years and also make music that I was proud of and meet people and have the fucking blast of, you know, have
Mm-hmm.
like that's a success for me. And like so yeah,
You got to
even
define that success. Yeah.
exactly. And even though I stopped doing that and I don't play in bands anymore, and I get, you know what it is so I run I run a podcast network, and every time like we do a new show or something pops up and I need to like write a theme for something or do music, I'm always like, yes, there we go. I get to like, you know, I get to create music for, you know, a 1 minute long introduction, and that's
All
like how I
right.
flex that little muscle. But anyways, like
Yeah. Well, I mean,
yeah,
think
it's
30
tough.
years from now, had you just plugged away and stand up, you could look back and be like, there were so many things I wanted to try that I didn't even
Yeah,
get to do. Like,
yeah, that's
I
true.
think it's just accepting the type of person you are and being like, as much as I understand that concentrated effort can yield rewards, like that's not who I am. I want to do all these, I want to grow all these different plants. And if
Right,
somehow the vines merge together into a beautiful structure one day,
right.
that's the kind of success I think that feels good when you want to. I mean, stand up can be limiting. That's what I realized. Like keeping the stand up hat on my head so tight for so long prevented me from exploring other parts of myself, my artistic capabilities, what I would let like doing comedy is such a get out of your comfort zone thing until
Yeah.
comedy becomes your comfort zone and keeps
Oh,
you from getting out of that.
when you start dreading stage time instead of being excited for stage time, oh man, that's a tough spot to be in.
Well, that was always a fine line for me. There was always
Yeah. Sure.
it's
Well,
always
you know what I mean. I mean
like,
outside of the day-to-day I'm a comic, why am I a comic thing. I
right,
mean more so when it starts feeling like work. Not like you're always dreading it because you're always going, I'm awful, nobody likes me, why am I doing this to myself?
right.
That's a
The
given.
other side of it too. Yes, I get it.
But I meant more so like like when it starts feeling
Less
like
of
a
the joy.
grind. Yeah, exactly. When it no longer sparks joy, like Marie Kondo. Um, but but yeah, I don't know. And then there's also the thing too about like we all again going back to like almost like defining success is I think that there are a ton of stand-ups or actors or musicians who like quote got famous or whatever you want to call it. They succeeded at the thing that they did, and then they also from there branch out and do all these other things. And you go, oh well, because they can do that, because they can like flex their muscle, like you know, they were, I'm trying to think of it. Michael Chiklis is a huge successful actor, and so he can go do a jazz album. Oh my God, do you hear that? It just started to hail insanely outside. Sorry to
You know
interrupt.
better than to mention Michael Chiklis's name and not expect the wrath of the gods.
Um, man, it's hailing like a mother.
Isn't the guy
Sorry if
from
that's really
the
loud.
guy who plays Hawkeye on the
Hawkeye,
Avengers?
yep, he's also like a
Renner.
musician. Yep, exactly. My uncle Kevin Bacon and the
That's
Bacon
right.
brothers. But yeah,
So seeing comedy is like because a lot of comics they get to a certain point in comedy and they're like, oh, thank God, I don't have to do this anymore. I can go act, I can go
right,
write, I can go,
right.
or I
Well,
can do it on my terms rather.
so it is weird though, and this is where I'm such a hypocrite. But maybe not. Maybe I'm just again, I'll play devil's advocate for myself here. Is the for me like the beginning of the end was really moving to Los Angeles and not being able to find my ride or dies, not being able to find the comics in LA that I fit in with because it not to turn this into just like shit on communities podcast, but man, the people that I found myself surrounded by in LA were the furthest thing from comics that I've ever met. The amount of LA comedians who are just actors who agents told them they were funny so they should do stand up because it would help their acting career, or just like comics who were. I don't think you need to be a riot off stage in order to be a good stand up or to be like a stand up, right? But if like you off stage don't have a comedic like edge to your personality in some way shape or form, I tend to just not get along. Like I'm kind of a ball buster, and I think that's like sort of the New Yorker in me. That's like hanging around guys, lingering around in the corner of guys like Robert Kelly and Ted Alexandro and like that Todd Barry. Like watching these people in New York, I feel like that kind of bled into a little bit, and I'm kind of a ball buster, and I feel like the sensitivity level in Los Angeles stand up, at least the group that I found myself in, I just didn't like the people I was around. So it's not like you do stand up to hang out with friends and to like, do fun shows together and tell jokes and work with each other. Like as much as the stand up crowds in Florida are weird, I actually found like a lot of respect and good writing partners in Florida when I was living there. Like,
Hmm.
he's actually out here now doing stand up. He's still doing it. Sandro Iocano, I think is his last
Yeah,
name.
Sandra. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yocolano, I believe.
Oh, yeah,
He
yeah,
was one of
yeah.
my first comedy friends in Tampa.
Yeah, he was in that group. One of my favorite writing partners from Tampa. It was short lived because he ended up moving to Washington State. But Courtney Shane Williams, he was just like such a good writing partner because I don't know, like there was like a comedy brain. I don't know how else to put it, but there's a comedy brain. And I
Right.
felt like the stand-ups in LA that I was around don't have comedy brain. They have entertainment industry brain.
Make
They
it.
have actor brain or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
That's
and man, it was tough to just be at. I didn't feel at home with any of the people that I was working with, and I
damn.
didn't enjoy doing the shows. I felt like I don't know. I kind of just found myself being like unhappy with the people I was around, and just kind of generally cranky at everybody. And this also, it should not be stated the way that your personal lives also affect this shit, because it should be known that when I moved to Los Angeles from Florida, the girl I thought I was gonna marry that was supposed to come with me ended up leaving me hanging after 3 or 4 months of living out here. I got the phone call that said like I'm not coming. Like I'm not making the move with you, which was the whole
Right.
plan.
Damn.
And like so who knows like how my headspace didn't also just play into my general disdain for everything that I was doing, whether it's stand up, acting, trying to get my own film projects together. Like who knows if that was not just a big part of the beginning of the end for me.
Hmm.
I definitely know that I lost a lot of material because I did a lot of material about our relationship, and I'm a bad liar on stage. Like I don't know. I'm sort of like the Brian Posehn school where like he tells that story about how he talks about his dad like being an alcoholic in some small little story, and somebody says like, oh, you should change that to something different because it'll just be funnier. It'll be able to set up, and he goes like, yeah, but that's not what happened. Like that's and I that always sort of stuck with me. So like when I moved out here, all the material I did about my happy, incredible relationship that I was in, about meeting the woman of my dreams and making it, and like I didn't deserve her. Like a lot of my shtick was that like I'm this awkward nerd, and she was like this, super hot. Like we were the couple that you saw in the mall and looked and went, really him? Like that was a lot of my angle, and I couldn't do that material anymore. I didn't feel because my material ended up being like, if I would do that, I would have to then end it with, well, that relationship's over. I just wanted to do that material, and I don't know. That even got a little laugh, but it wasn't. I don't know. It started to not feel
Dude,
like,
that's
you
so
know.
funny. I've seen
Um,
that a whole bunch. Yeah, and you didn't think about like recouching it in a way that like
I I did. I
doesn't work
definitely did.
sometimes, right?
I turned a lot, and again, I did get material out of the heartbreak, but it became unfun. It became cynical. It became not who I liked being on stage. It became not like, you know, my favorite stand-ups are the people who you feel like you're getting the most legitimate version of them, but there's a big similarity between like the best wrestlers and the best stand-up comics. It's like your real personality just turned up to 11, like whoever you really are, but a little bit more than that.
Uh-huh.
um and I feel like in life I have a somewhat cynical public persona because of, I think, of my podcast network, and because like I lay on the like in my group of friends and the people that I'm around with, because I have the sort of like crotchety Long Islander, like that New York sort of like, what are you doing? I have a problem with everything. Like I'm very blab. I get called Larry David a lot. I get compared to him quite a bit. So I lay that on a little extra thick, like. But the reality is who I really am. I think is a little bit more goofy. I'm very optimistic. I'm a big risk taker. Like hell, that's I'm turning 38 in like a couple days here, pushing 40, and like I'm still just doing the same shit that I've done since I was 20 years old. And it's because I'm an optimistic guy. Like I like to think that I'm a zany, positive dude, and man, I definitely stopped becoming that after the move to LA. So that might have been part of it. It might have been and part of that, but.
Do you think that you like robed yourself up in this kind of spiky, ball-bustery exterior, as like either a vehicle or a defense mechanism or both to kind of
Oh, that extends so far beyond just stand up. That's just Jake as a human. Yeah, that's something I've done since I was a child.
right?
Yeah, since I was a child, I had so many. I had. Look at me talking past tense like I've improved.
You're
Um,
perfectly fine
I,
now.
I'm more aware of them now. Doesn't mean they're gone. Working through it. We're doing it together, folks. But so many insecurity issues, so many like issues about my role as a man in modern society, and like the whole reason the name thing. Like I have these massive daddy issues. Dad took off before I was born. Lived with a mom who wasn't entirely always honest, and who, as much as she did a great job raising me as a single mom, I still then have problems with. You know what I mean? So like, my siblings are from different parents, so I'm technically an only child, but I have 7 siblings. I've just like I've lived my whole life
Sounds like you
feeling
should do
like,
stand up. No,
You know what? That was part of it. Like, literally, that was part of it. It
people
was
say
just sort
that,
of like,
right? Yeah.
I always felt like I was part of something, but I was the outcast of the something. And I would take my insecurities and I'd project those onto other people's opinions of me, which probably weren't even true. And I would, like you said, man, roll myself up in a spiky ball. But you know what, though? I uh, uh, more porcupine than armadillo, because there was also offense there.
You could shoot out the
My
spines.
Yes, exactly. There you go. I was homeward bound, spine and chance in the cheek. Was that his name? Like the dog from Homeward Bound. But so there is. I think that definitely also lent itself to my issues, in stand up. But that's just also something that I've dealt with my entire professional life and all of the arts and in everything I've ever done.
They do
But
get
I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it, and like that's something that I've tried to improve through the years, and also I do I do feel like the people who know me best don't get any of that. Like it's a weird wall. Like I'm that person who's just like the people who like really know me and the people who kind of know me. If they talk about who I am as a person, two completely different people. Like literally, they could be talking about two
wow.
completely different individuals. A good buddy of mine, he's a great filmmaker and he works in the industry out here. His name is Matt Hinkstman. He does the D&D podcast that I do with me. He once told me the best description of myself, and that was like, you're the guy that people thinks hate him, meaning like Daniel, you would think I hate you, yet I would be the only person who showed up to help you move. Like
Interesting.
that's the best description I feel of.
Yes.
And
Okay.
there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in sort of my my relationships with other stand-ups and other artists for sure. But I
No,
digress. I feel like we went on a big tangent there. But yeah,
no, that's the whole
emotional
point here.
problems.
It's all tying into it.
Yeah, sure.
So so then going from New York, where you were doing all sorts of stuff, but interested in
Right,
stand up.
right.
Life brought you to Tampa, where you really started to dive into stand up.
Yeah.
Life brought you to LA,
Hmm.
which started to really ruin stand up and your
Sort
experience
of,
in it.
a little bit.
So what brought you to the point where you're like, I'm done?
So here's the thing, and I don't know. Maybe I'm
Or are you not
maybe
done? Which you don't
maybe
need.
we've just recorded however long we've been chatting, and I'm not a good guest for the show because I never quit stand up. I never went like that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done. I went from, moving out here and doing 6 nights a week to doing 3 nights a week to doing 2 nights every week to doing once every other week to doing once a month to doing once every 3 months to doing once every 6 months to doing like it just still slowly started to teeter. I think the thing is it became less of a priority.
Mm.
That's what it was. Um, uh, and it ebbs and flows. My better half here, Alexandra, she constantly tells me like, why don't you just go do stand up again? Because she feels like it is the era of my life that she says I talk the most fondly about, as far as like the joy that it brought me and like my love for what, because I love stand up. I still to this day love stand up. You know what I mean? Like I watch every new special that comes out. I analyze it. I'm still learning from it. I still write. I still in my phone in the notes app, like writing bits. And if I come up with something that's a good premise, because, that's not to say that it's not going to end up in a feature of mine or, a movie, you know what I mean? But like, I'm still always thinking and always writing.
Yeah.
For me, I think it was definitely that I started taking my acting career more seriously, and time when if you really want to succeed as a stand up, like you got to put in those nights, you got to put in those night to night things. So one, I started concentrating more on my acting career, and then I started making my own stuff. I actually started doing that in Florida. I made my first short film in Florida. And I moved out to LA thinking like, oh, I don't have to do that again because I'm going to get cast and everything. And of course, that doesn't happen. And I realized like, all right, well, I also have this gift to be able to make something and to see it through fruition. And I'm not the best writer and I'm not the best director, but I can get a project done. And I know that the project will be watchable. And it, I feel like being an actor on film school sets, to which I'm not a student of that school, taught me so much more than if I would have went to film school.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally. You see
And
so many people do it wrong and then get
oh yeah,
instructed on how to do it right in real
yep.
time.
And I have no emotional investment in it, so I can't. Like the students, they think they're right, even when they're told or they see that it's bad. They still think it's the best thing the best thing in the world because they're dumb 17-year-old students, 18-year-old, you know what I mean, or 18, 19, however old you are in college. I didn't go. But anyways, so I was concentrating more on that out here, and I was just doing other things that kind of just ebbed and flowed. And also, I just like I also like I realized that when I was living in Florida, I got stage time close to where I lived, and I could travel, even if I wasn't traveling far out of state, because Tampa's Central Florida. It takes a while to get out of the state just to just to get out of it. It's you're way down there. So like, but even if I was doing dates in Jacksonville, or if I was doing dates like a Gainesville, like you could still travel and do road gigs. But then I moved out to LA, and like, man, the battle for stage time out here was real. The first few nights that I got booked at the Improv here, that's the one thing that was nice about working at the Improv in Tampa, was that the manager of that club, Bob, was he was the nicest guy. He's a total character. He's an absolute muppet of a human being.
Hmm.
He's literally just a tweak from South Park grown up, just like coffee and just like he's very like, but man, I really love that dude. Like he was such a, like, he was not a bullshit artist. He was just very like straight and to the point. And
Refreshing.
when I told him I was moving out, especially for a club manager or owner, like when I told him I was moving out here, he called up Reed out here and was just like, hey, I got a guy coming. He's really funny. He's got a future. Like I really like
Wow.
him. You should give him a shot. And she literally she welcomed me with open arms, and she was like, hey, like we help out our improv family, and gave me a bunch of dates. And I want to say the first 3 dates that I ever got at the Improv out here, I got bumped all 3 times.
Oh shit.
I got bumped the first, I think 2 times I got bumped by Drew Carey, who was working on material for a thing he was hosting, I think. And then oh shit, who bumped me that last time? And it's because, like, when you're a new guy in town, first off, you're getting the 1 a.m. spot anyway, right? And so when someone comes and does 30, 40 minutes that wasn't even supposed to be in the showcase for the evening, you're gone. You and 2 people after or before, you were both gone.
Uh-huh.
So that became part of the grind. And obviously, yeah, I did find the small clubs and the small venues, but I never, again, my fault. I never went and just tried to get into the alt scene. I never went and tried to get in at Largo or UCB
There it
or,
is. Sure.
yeah. And I don't know. I don't know why. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself to befriend better people. But alas, that's not how it worked
Time
out.
doesn't work that way. Yes.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
so,
again, I'm like, you're reminding me of so many things in mind. I'm like, damn,
yeah,
that's very similar to, I could have made better friends here. I could have gone to
right,
Comedy Works, one of the best clubs in the
right,
country here in Denver. I could have
right.
gone every Tuesday and haunted it, but I didn't.
Man, I did 2 weeks in Seattle, at some point in between the Florida to LA area, somewhere in that area, like before I moved, because I also spent a little time in Vegas, and I did shows in Vegas. My brother lives out there, so I stayed with him, and I was doing shows in Vegas, and it was, just trying to do stand up wherever I could. But man, when I went to Seattle, I did a couple dates at, I think it's called Comedy Underground. It's like a really beautiful club. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. Even people who don't know it,
Hmm.
they see a photo of it and they go, "Oh, I've seen stand up from this place." That's people have videoed. And that, man, those crowds, I don't think I ever got reactions like I did out of those crowds. Like, those were my people. I felt like they were just like, they were like, yeah, comic book nerd jokes that are about like trying to not, like, because a lot of my material was about not fitting in, and again, some of it was sort of dry and weird, and I would do weird jokes about people that showed up, mystical figures who have showed up in my life, and it was sort of like metaphysical, like uh metaphors, and just like comedy that wasn't like, oh, this is a true story this guy is telling, but I would tell it as if it was a true story.
Right.
Just weird shit.
There's an audience
Weird
for that. It's true.
weird shit. And they dug it. And man, I often think like, why didn't I just stay there for like 7 months? Right? Like, why did I
Right.
leave?
Worked
But you
for
know
Canal
what?
Bell. Yeah, a lot of people came out of
A,
Seattle.
a part of it too, I think, is, I think I have at least part of the answer for why I didn't stay in some of those places, or just do more of that. I think I don't have the road life mentality. As I said earlier, don't drink. I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink. I don't. I'm not a. I'm not. I have no problem with alcohol. I have no problem with Uh, drugs, I'm a pro fucking weed. I want everybody to be high all the time. I
Actually,
don't
give me a second, then. Hold on.
I don't I I don't partake myself, but it has nothing to do that has nothing to do with my opinions on it. But like when you're not that dude, it's hard to find like a crew.
Yeah,
It was
dude.
nice being a DD. People
Uh-huh.
loved having me around to drive. That was the thing. But also I have like a drunk people tolerance. You
Uh-huh.
know, I'm the dude that leaves the party at 11 even though it's going to go until 1 in the morning because people started at 9 and by 11 everybody's blitz and I have nobody to talk to.
They flip. I
Um,
like it. They're like,
so there is a little bit of that in it, and then on top of that, like I'm like at heart, I'm like a weird suburban dad in my soul. Like I'm like I love my dogs and I like being home and I like watching movies at night, and at some point like the grind of like oh man, I have to be out 7 nights a week. It's bad for relationships. I couldn't, like the first couple girls that I met in LA, even though I was still just totally heartbroken over the Florida situation, like of her, like I still struggled to maintain any good positive relationship because what do you want to do tonight? I don't know. You want to come see my stand up show and then we'll hang out afterwards? Like that's God, that gets tiring. And also, when the show doesn't go well, you're screwed. You're not
that's
getting any.
done.
Like,
Yeah.
like, there was one or two times where I remember being like, getting booked on a show that I was surprised. Like, I was like, yeah, dude, I got a spot at the Laugh Factory. Like, yeah, this is great. And then like a girl's like, oh, what are you gonna do? You want to hang out Friday night? And I was like, yeah, I actually have a spot at the Laugh Factory Friday night. You want to come to a stand-up show? Blah, 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 blah. And then I would go and I'd fucking bomb or something. Or just like, even if I wouldn't bomb, even if in my brain it didn't go as good as I wanted it to go. Or if I thought the person before or after me was just that much better.
It's like, oh, she wants to date them now instead of me.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
somehow that's how it works.
Yeah, of course. Everybody knows the girls and or guys leave with the best girls and or guys who are the funniest people that night. Everybody
Right.
knows
And
that.
they
That's just
get
the
prom
rules.
king and then push you
That's
into
the
the
rules.
lockers. We
Yeah,
all know how it
exactly.
goes.
But I don't even know what the hell I was talking about at that point. I lost train of thought. But yeah,
But
I know. I was talking about like my temperament and just like also like the lifestyle of it. Like
dude,
I don't.
the hang is something that comes up a lot
Yeah, the
um,
hang.
in comedy, and being funny, being on time, and the hang are like the three things that people think about when booking you. And if you don't hang and put
Yeah.
in that face time, like
Oh yeah.
just eating shit at the bar until 2 a.m. and then going to the diner and then smoking weed in the parking lot and then drinking
Yep.
more, like
Yep.
that hurts you in a way. And it's something I feel like maybe you can do certain people, it's different in certain times in your life. I was much better at it in my 20s. In my 30s, my
Same.
tolerance is much lower for it.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Because there's also a difference in sort of where you are in any given relationship because uh, if I'm with somebody that I enjoy being with, I don't want to hang out at the club until 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning after the show, or like you said, go to a diner. I want to go home and be with the person that I like being with.
right.
And so when it's easier when you're single, it's easier to do the hang because you think, hey, maybe I'll meet somebody.
Right.
Maybe that cute guy at the bar or this hot girl at the fucking waitress of the Bob's Big Boys, like you're like you're more kind of looking around, so you tolerate it more. But then you meet somebody you like, and you go like, I don't know, why do I hang out with these
With these people,
four fucking neckbeard comics when I can be home with my hot girlfriend or boyfriend? Like, so that's part of it. That's definitely part of it. The hang is really part of it, and that's something that, by the way, is not exclusive to stand up. I have struggled even in like
yeah.
a lot of my big emotional hangups as an actor or as a filmmaker are from the fact that I think that I deal with like a selective FOMO where I feel like I have been overlooked by friends. I often feel, and a lot of this is probably just bullshit, and I'm just doing it to myself, But I can't acknowledge. I have to acknowledge the reality in my brain as far as the way it makes me feel, and I
Let it
often
out.
feel like I get overlooked for parts or inclusion in projects or films, and then I realize the people who are getting it are oh, that's right, those are the people that they go drink with. Those are the people who do the like that, and it's like that's what it is. It's
Hmm.
all the social aspect
Right.
of networking plays such a huge part in stand up or entertainment industry. And I'm sure you know what?
Business in general, I guess now that
I'm
you
sure
mention it.
sure
Sure.
it's no different if you're a fucking contractor.
Right.
If you're if you're a site manager and you're building houses for a living and you really like this electrician guy you go get drunk with, even if there's another electrician who's probably better for the job, maybe even a tiny bit cheaper, you're gonna hire your buddy who you go drinking with because that's fucking Dale. Dale and I just get drunk on Tuesday nights and go bowling. Like like there's
Right. That's a hard
um
reality.
so I think not drinking, not partaking is a big part of it. And I would try and like I would actively try to make it okay. Like the other thing that I also realized in my late 20s, early 30s, I realized that if I stopped saying I don't drink and started saying I can't drink, people become slightly bit okay with it.
Uh-huh. I like
Um, I
there's
never
psychology there.
I never lied to anybody. I've never told anybody, "Oh, I have a big problem and I can't drink." I just changed a little bit of the verbiage, and people just go like, oh, "Okay," or like sometimes I just say like, "No, I'm sober," and like I'm sober, but people assume, "Oh, he must have had a big problem. Let me not let me not harp on it."
Right. And for some
Um,
reason they're like, "Oh, he may not be cool now, but he used to be cool, so he's still
maybe,
kind of cool."
yeah. You know what? There's a little bit of that psychology that I would definitely play in. I would also that is something that I learned very young. I didn't really do it. I didn't really do it to fellow stand-ups or actors or whatever, fellow art creative types, but I would always do it to bartenders. Anytime I would order a fucking Sprite or whatever from a
Feel guilty
bartender,
not giving him money, right?
or what I would say, I would always just be like, "Hey man, can I get a Sprite? I'm driving tonight." Because sometimes I was just driving myself around, but I was still driving, and they would assume they would be like, "Oh, okay, man, thank you." People would say thank you. They'd be like, "Oh, thank you, man. Like we appreciate you being today," and then they wouldn't charge you for
Thank you for
whatever
your
soda you.
service. Right.
Yeah, they would, but they would also not charge you for whatever soda you were drinking that night.
That's a hot tip for all you
Yeah,
sober
yeah,
bar hoppers out there.
or anybody who just wants free soda at a bar,
Right.
like just be like, "Yeah, I'm driving."
Damn. Well, what a journey. So you redefined, I like that because basically I started this podcast because I wasn't sure if I wanted to quit or not. And I
Right,
felt like I had to make that choice.
right,
And then I realized I don't have to make that choice. It's more complicated than that. You can redefine your relationship with this thing without like nailing the door shut on it.
right.
And eventually stand up just becomes another thing that you can do.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. It's another creative outlet for when you have room or need to flex that outlet or to utilize that outlet.
mm,
Because I will say, like, it's been this right now is definitely the longest I've ever gone without doing stand up. I think 4 years ago, what's it, 2021? I think yeah, shit. Wow. Oh boy. Late 2017, I think. I might be getting my dates wrong. It might be early 2017 or late 2016. A buddy of mine books a show at a comic book store, and didn't realize that I had sort of waned away from stand up, and was just sort of like, "Hey, I got a spot open in the show." Just like reached out. I haven't heard from him in like years. Was like, "Hey, you want a spot on the show?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, great." And I went and I did my 10 or 15 minutes of, stupid comic book nerd material and talked about how Superman's an asshole and whatever dumb bits I have. And just, and I was like, great, awesome. I got to flex it and it was like super low pressure. And, like it was just a fun night. And like, so I'm not that person who's like, if somebody calls me up and has a thing for me, I'm going to go like, no, I don't do stand up anymore. But I'm not out here like, I'm not hustling. I'm done with the hustle for stand up at the moment. It's just not. It's if a buddy of mine is recording a special and it's like, hey, you want to come open for me because I'm recording a special and I'd like you to be a part of that night. Yeah, sure, great, awesome. I'll come do that. I feel like I have enough material still. Like I've got however many years at this point, almost 20 years since I started. Like the first time I ever did stand up was almost 20 years ago. And not to say that my material is 20 years old, but I've accumulated enough material to pull from throughout the years to where I'm like, oh, if I need a thing for this, like I can.
right. You got plenty of
pull.
in sync jokes and
Yeah, pull
witty,
enough.
you
And
know.
there's enough crap going on a day-to-day basis that, it's easy enough, but
Right. That's a good place to be with it.
sure.
And it seems that part of, because some people have stand up as the only artistic thing in their life. And then when they lose that, they kind of don't know who they are or their identity or anything.
Right.
it seems like you were definitely cushioned
Sure.
by the myriad of other artistic pursuits, from music to film to acting. Um, so give us a little about how you transitioned to, you were telling me earlier you have a feature film, which super
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Give us a little about like how you really shifted that focus. And so, I mean, first of all, you decided to stay in LA
Yes. Yeah.
because that, that, well, you'll tell me why. But
Well,
yeah,
I mean, it was always the end game. Like,
okay.
I never, again, I was, even when I was in New York before I moved for the girl to Pensacola, I intended on going to Los Angeles because in my brain, that's where people act.
I love it. It's the natural all artists. You
Yeah.
start in New York
Yep.
to get, and then you go to Pensacola, Florida, as everybody knows, and then
And then Tampa.
LA. Yeah,
Yeah. Don't forget Tampa. Yeah.
that's right.
But so it was always the intention out here to be out here, of course. And again, like I never wanted to just be a stand-up. So it's not so much as transitioning into it as much as it's just continuing to do the one thing and doing the other thing a little bit less.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, when I was in Florida, I had, met some other like-minded filmmaker-y types, and I was like, you know what, I got an idea for a short film. I'm gonna shoot the short film because I was sick of the acting roles I was getting because they were all in student films that weren't good. And like even the commercials, like I had fun doing some commercials that to this day I look back and go like, that's a good commercial that I was in, like, but it was like a tiny little Tampa, local whatever.
Sure.
So I was like, no, I want something that's like good that I can kind of flex. And I was like, well, you know what? I have this idea for a story. I'm just gonna do it myself. So I did that myself, and I kind of found that ability to like, oh, I know how to make something for no money. I know how to pull. I know how to use my resources well. I feel like it's something that I've always been good at. And just because of the way that I was that kid in high school who always did stuff, who always was like, I'm in bands or I'm in this, like I became a self-promotion machine early on. Like I learned how to do web development just because my band needed a website. I learned how to do graphic design because as a kid I always wanted to be a comic book artist, so I was really good at basic art stuff. But then I realized like, oh no, we need flyers. Let me learn how to like become proficient in Photoshop so I can make good flyers for my bands, and then that also translated right into stand-up flyers. When I got out to actually, oh my god, when I was working in Florida, that was a job that I ended up getting just totally accidentally for like tons of clubs in Florida, from Side Splitters to the Improv.
Oh yeah.
Funny Bone what was the one that was in the hotel? Was it the Funny Bone?
There was Coconuts.
Coconuts. That's the one I'm thinking of. Thank you, Coconuts. They all hired me to do all their flyer work because I was like the graphic design guy, so I could do like for whoever their feature was for the week. But anyway, so I had
You had
all
to
these.
deal with Coconuts' hideous, crazy logo of like
Oh my
the giant
god,
Cheshire floating pair of lips with like a weird hat and like
creepy, and the googly eyes.
what
Didn't it
the
have like
fuck?
googly eyes? Oh god, it was terrible.
Horrifying. Not
Looks
comforting.
It's like a cartoon version of what a business in Florida looks like. That's what the Coconuts logo actually was. Like
We're gonna flash it on screen for the viewers later.
great. Anyways, what the fuck was I talking about?
You
Oh
being
yeah,
the
the
flyer
transition.
guy, you got everything
Transitioning, yeah.
merged into
So I
it.
had all these sorts of talents, and when I got to LA, it was just sort of more of the same. It was more of the like, oh, I'm not getting the roles I want, so I started making short films with a buddy of mine. I met. I worked on the final season of 24, and on that show, I met these two gentlemen. One named Kenny Cooper, and the other one named Tony Wayne. And the three of us became close creative types. And so they're actually like they star in like my big featurette that I made out here, which is like this action adventure Indiana Jonesy thing called the Skull Rosary. And then like I would just write for them and write more parts for them and just keep doing stuff. And I'm at a point now where I've been out in LA now for going on 12 years, and I'm still in the grind. I'm still doing it, but I'm not getting the guest star spots on TV and all the things that I find some of my cohorts doing. So it's about creating my own path. I'm realizing like, no, I'm going to continue to make my work, and that'll be the way I find success. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to end up this huge, renowned filmmaker. But one would hope at least that I attempt to have some semblance of a career that keeps me financially stable out of it. And so I'm just continuing to do that. And I started a podcast network, Dragon Wagon Radio.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It's just an indie podcast network that I started with a buddy of mine, Zenith, to just help because of all those abilities that I have, which are all just like the production and presentational elements. there's a bunch of people that I know that are like, oh, I have a podcast that I want to do, but I don't know how to make a podcast, or I don't know, where to record it, or how to do it, or how to make the art, or how to whatever, how to present it. So it's like, it's really just a creative collective that kind of flies under my banner, in which I help all these people kind of with their shows.
Cool.
And it's all about, like, it's not a money making machine. Like, yeah, we sell T-shirts and we like have shops and stuff like that, but it's really just all about like helping other creatives and bringing everybody up, holding each other to a standard, so that instead of us all competing with one another, instead of it being like, oh, I also have a podcast, and so I don't know, like, I have a podcast. Like, instead of it being about whether people should listen to your show or my show, that's the stupidest thing in the world. Everybody should listen to like, we should all just be bringing each other up. And so that was sort of where Dragon Wagon Radio was stemmed from. It stemmed from the need to collectively bring everybody up as a unit, instead of all of these individual people just scrambling for their own slice of the pie,
That's a great
Um,
goal, but even the what do you call them? Shitty artists?
sure.
Okay, cool. Give 'em,
Um,
give 'em their own. Okay. In case we disconnect, my cat is laying on my keyboard right now. Nice.
that's his job, right? Isn't that the point of the cat?
I think we're okay. Yeah, it's true. She's
Um,
earning her rent.
but I about the feature, I would be remiss if I didn't use the opportunity to just
Please.
shamelessly plug it. So in the same way that I was making short films and web series, we did a sketch show called The Board, all this fun stuff you can find if you just search for my crap. But I got invited to go do a literary festival in Missouri. No, Missouri. No, what was the name of that state next to Wisconsin? Minnesota. That's the place.
Yeah. So
Um,
many M1s too.
I know, right? It's just New York, Los Angeles, and then America in the middle. But I went to go, be this like speaker for this literary festival because of the short film. And that whole weekend, I was telling all these college kids, like, you have no excuse to make something. You have no excuse to make something. You have no excuse to make something. And meanwhile, I had like 3 or 4 feature scripts that I'm like trying to sell and trying to get made. And I'm like waiting for somebody else to allow me to make a movie. And I kind of just, on the plane ride back, I was like, shit, I just gotta take my own advice and just take one of these and just make it. So,
Damn, you get to take your own advice. You are
yeah,
dispensing, telling all these youngins, do what you love, do what you love. Meanwhile, you're
right,
like, when is Martin Scorsese gonna call me
right,
back?
sure, yeah, seriously.
I'm here. Oh, you got a cat too. I've spotted a
Oh
cat
yeah,
too. And good.
there's 2 of them walking around here.
I knew it.
That's Cody right there. Clancy's around here somewhere. Um,
Little puppy.
but
So yes.
anyways,
So you
anyways,
said
yes.
I'm doing it.
So
Fuck it.
I'm said I'm doing it, and I took a feature script idea that I had, and I sort of adjusted it to make it shootable for no money with no crew. And the end result of that is my debut feature film entitled Pinch, which is available right now via Amazon and Amazon Prime. It is a real heartfelt kind of feel good story about 2 strangers who are brought together by the opportunity to own a rare and valuable sports collectible. But in order to do so, they have to step out of their comfort zones and onto a baseball field. So it's not a sports movie, but there's a little sports in it.
Okay, good. You almost lost me for a second.
No, it's essentially what happens when the Sandlot grows up. That's sort of the tagline for it. It's very much a grown up version of the Sandlot.
I like that.
So yeah, if you're into sort of the indie dramedy, shot entirely by myself with no crew, macro budget, I could not be more proud of it.
Micro. Yeah.
No, even smaller than that. Macro, even
Macro is
tinier.
smaller?
I think so, isn't it? Isn't that how it works?
I thought macro was big and micro was small.
Listen, I'm not a word. I don't know about all sorts of definitions here. All right.
I'm
All
a
right, sure.
filmmaker, okay?
Whatever you said is what it is. Nothing. The answer is nothing.
Teensy.
But very proud of it, and
Pinch, available on Amazon Prime. Or
Yep,
Amazon Direct.
Amazon and Amazon Prime. You can buy or rent it if you aren't a Prime subscriber. If you're a Prime subscriber, you have it for free, available here in the UK as well.
Oh, hell yeah. Well, we will definitely watch and encourage our people to watch that and support your film endeavors.
I appreciate that.
What next?
Well, I need a haircut because the pandemic hair is getting a little out of control. Yours works though. Like yours grows
My
up and
partner,
out.
luckily, I was getting a mean mullet.
Yeah,
and she shored me up a little bit because
nice.
I was getting rough.
She cut my hair in like April of 2020, and I was like, we're not doing this again. Did not go so well. But
Might wait for a vaccine, sure.
I got my first of the two. I didn't get like sick or anything, but oh my god, it felt like I could not use my arm for like 24 or 48 hours. I was in
Yeah.
so
Only to
much
buy
pain.
things from Microsoft. That's the only
I
thing.
think it's Macrosoft.
They're
But
much bigger.
anyways, what's next? You know what? The pandemic did definitely throw a huge monkey wrench in my plans. But um, I'm super proud of Pinch. I would do it all again, mostly the same way. But I still learned, and although I did not sell it to a giant distribution company, it did not launch. It did not all of a sudden spark a career for me. It has given me at least, it's a rung up the ladder. I have a first feature underneath me. And so what's next is likely just doing another one and probably doing it not wildly different, doing it again on my own. But I have a few, literally, uh, I have a notebook for every movie. And so, so, I'm working on a variety of different projects. And, the idea is I keep working through these until one of them, the light bulb goes off for like, no, I know how we can shoot this and we can make this work. And so that's what's next is trying to get my second feature going and learning from the mistakes I made while making Pinch and growing it and making it better and maybe hopefully making it something that's slightly more sellable because as much as I love the story of Pinch, it was definitely a very brash lesson in film distribution and in sales and acquisitions because man, when you make a non-genre piece with no big names in it, it doesn't matter how pretty it is or how beautiful or how much you'll cry at the end. It's just a tough sell.
Wow,
So
non-genre. Hmm.
yeah, like because you know what it is genre translates overseas. Horror, action, sci-fi, it translates universally, but drama does not translate. You can't necessarily throw a foreign language over genre and have all of it match quite the same and so there was definitely some struggles in trying to get the movie sold and hopefully I'm going to learn from those mistakes and still be true to myself, still make the art that I want to make and tell the stories I want to tell. I'm actually really really excited about the three that I kind of have in the docket right now. They're three really personal stories, much like Pinch was a very very personal story with a lot of my real life put into it. These all have one facet of my very real life turned up quite a bit for each individual kind of tale. So that's what's next. Continuing to do that, and still doing the podcast network, Dragon Wagon Radio. You can find all of our great podcasts at dragonwagonradio.com. We've got so many fun shows. I've got a personal show that's not wildly different to this, where I sit down with like-minded creatives and chat. That show's called Elaborate. We do a homebrew RPG show that so we play like a D&D inspired homebrew RPG, and then we edit it down and sort of like punch it up and sound design it. So instead
Huh.
of it being like other D&D shows where you're just hearing a bunch of people all chatter around and talk over each other, when by the time you hear it, it's just like listening to a radio play. Like it's
Cool.
it's you once we
Clang
start
clang.
yeah, once yeah, but not just that, but also like you're just in the world with the characters. Like you don't hear crosstalk, you don't hear us yapping to each other or saying dumb inside jokes that nobody gets. Like so that one's really fun too, and we have tons of stuff on the network. We've got like 20 something shows at this point in the archive.
Dude, and so dragonwagonradio.com.
Yep, dragonwagonradio.com.
Hell yes. Everyone check out that. Check out Pinch on Amazon. We are rounding third base headed towards home. You've been very generous with your time. And this has been a great I'm be doing very little editing on this episode, which is always a treat.
Great.
Any final let's see. Are you still a comedian?
Man, I knew you were gonna ask this question. I fucking knew it. So that might be the biggest struggle for me. More so than whether I acknowledge that I'm not doing it anymore is whether I allow myself to call myself that. What is a comedian in 2021? If people consider um, Bill Hader a comedian, then yeah, I'm a comedian. But if it's strictly the person who does stand-up comedy, then I don't know if 2021 I call myself an active comedian. I might call myself a once comedian. But
That's a distinction there, because you might still be a comedian, but you might not be a stand-up comedian.
maybe, not sure.
But you
Can
still
I just say?
are.
Can I say I'm a once and future comedian? Can I say that? Because
like,
then I'm both honest and potentially a liar, but I don't know yet. It's like
ooh,
Schrodinger's cat. There's the question for you. Am I a comedian? I don't know. Is the cat alive or dead?
it's a Schrodinger situation. It's definitely, if you were a plumber for 10 years and then you stop
Right.
fixing toilets, like
Right.
you can still plumb.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm inclined to say that I am. But I'm also from the school of stand up that knows I will get ridiculed for saying so. But I don't know that I care anymore. I think as I creep towards 40, I don't care what people call me.
Right.
Yeah,
You'd be
I think
balls busted
I'm
by
a stand up.
those same New York style people would be anxious to bust those Hollywood balls.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? How many other never mind. I'm going to save that statement. Yes, I'm a stand up.
Ready
I'm
to
trying
fire
to
some
self-promote.
shots here, but we're gonna sheath our weapon.
Yeah, I did. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying not to be the porcupine, man. Trying not to be the porcupine.
We're bringing out the cute little echidna inside of you.
Oh man, where the back feet look like the front feet and they're walking in weird directions.
Like, you're still spiky, but they don't hurt. I love it.
Exactly.
Well, fantastic, brother. This was such a naturally flowing interview. I barely had to glance at my question sheets. Thanks. Hopefully
you,
it'll
man.
be quicker than 11 years before we talk
Sure.
again. And also, if
So-
you need an almost identical looking person with a extremely similar skill set for any of your films, there's absolutely no reason to call me. But
no. Sure.
one
Yeah,
day,
man.
who knows?
Your
Collab. Cool. Thanks again for your time, Jake.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate you. Take care, and yeah, be in touch. Dragon
Yeah, we'll
Wagon.
talk soon, man.
All right, bro.
Thanks, bud.
Oh, and thanks. What a great interview. I imagine this was recorded before it happened. But thank you so much for being here, everybody. Please follow us on YouTube at my YouTube channel, Daniel Reskin. You can find all the pod there and all the videos. And we're on iTunes as well. Spread the word, and be your own friend. Stop beating up on yourself. All right? Sometimes quitting is a good thing. Or just pausing. Or whatever. You don't even have to put words on it. Okay? Have a great one. Bye.